So imagine going to a doctor for, I don't know, chronic back pain. You're sitting
Yeah.
there on the exam table just waiting for a physical therapy referral.
Right, or maybe an MRI order, just standard medical stuff.
Exactly. But instead of that, the doctor comes in and hands you a checklist of your great-grandfather's moral failings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then he asks about any, like, unconfessed resentment towards your boss and finally tells you to take a deep breath and literally cough up a demon.
I mean, for the vast majority of people walking into a modern clinic, that sounds indistinguishable from a horror movie script.
It sounds completely absurd, but, when you step outside the standard clinical model and dive into the vast, highly systematized world of modern deliverance ministries, that exact scenario isn't just plausible.
It's actually standard operating procedure.
It really is. And that is our mission today. We are taking a deep dive into this incredibly intricate, deeply structured worldview where theology, history, and spiritual warfare just completely overlap.
And we are working with a really diverse stack of sources to map this out for you.
Yeah. What do we have today?
Well, we have a foundational biblical text from the Gospel of Luke, some doctrinal statements like the healing scriptures, and then these highly practical training manuals from deliverance organizations.
Right, like Gene Moody Ministries and Practical Living Ministry.
Exactly. Plus, we've got a massive bibliography of Catholic and charismatic healing literature.
It's a huge stack. And just to set the ground rules for you, the listener, right up front, we are dealing with deeply held religious beliefs today. Stuff about exorcisms, curses, and demonic forces.
We should be clear, we are not here to endorse this theology or debate its validity.
Absolutely not. Our goal is just to act as your guides, impartially unpacking the mechanics of what these original source materials actually claim.
We want to trace how a localized ancient belief, the idea that physical ailments are tied to unseen forces, has been, well, engineered into the modern bureaucratic deliverance frameworks operating around the world today.
Right, so to understand that modern framework, you really have to look at the architectural blueprint they're using.
And almost all of these ministries anchor their operations in a specific historical text. It's from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, verses 10 through 17.
The story of Jesus healing an infirm woman.
Correct. The text describes a woman who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years.
18 years, that's a long time.
It is, and the physical description is very specific. She was bent over and could not fully straighten herself. So Jesus is teaching in a synagogue on the Sabbath. He calls her forward and says, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity."
And then he touches her, right?
Yeah, he touches her, and she instantly straightens up.
But the synagogue ruler is absolutely indignant about this. He turns to the crowd and essentially says, hey, there are 6 days for work. Come get healed on those days, not on the Sabbath.
Which is just a rigid adherence to the law over, immediate human restoration.
From a bureaucratic standpoint, it's wild. It's like a surgeon performing an emergency, life-saving operation, and a hospital administrator writing them up for violating the weekend scheduling policy.
That's a great way to put it. And Jesus points out the hypocrisy of this instantly. He notes that anyone there would untie their ox or donkey to give it water on the Sabbath.
Right.
So why shouldn't this woman, whom he explicitly says Satan has kept bound for 18 years, be untied on the Sabbath?
That specific language really stands out to me. Jesus doesn't say cured or healed in that moment. He uses the words set free or untied when referring to a curvature of the spine.
Yeah, it's very deliberate.
Is there a mechanical reason in the text for that word choice? Like, why would a spiritual entity care about her posture?
Well, the commentaries provided in our sources unpack that mechanical link beautifully. John McEvely, he's a 19th century commentator, analyzes the original Greek verb used in the text.
Okay, what's the verb?
It's luo. It translates to loosed or untied. McEvely argues this word is used because her sinews and muscles had been literally physically contracted by the spirit.
Oh, wow. So the spiritual affliction wasn't just like a vague, dark cloud over her mood. It manifested as a literal knot in her physical muscles.
Yes. The healing required unbinding of physical structure. Furthermore, Cornelius a Lapid's commentary points out that this aligns with the ancient understanding that God permits devils to send diseases.
Like the story of Job.
Exactly like Job, whose body was covered in sores by Satan. A Lapid argues there was a psychological and spiritual motive behind the demon's specific attack on this woman.
Which was what?
By making her crooked and bent, the spirit compelled her to, quote, always look down upon the earth. It kept her focus on the dirt rather than the heavens.
That is fascinating. The physical posture is basically a forced metaphor for the state of her soul.
It's a brilliant piece of historical analysis, really.
It is. It suggests the body is just a canvas for a much larger spiritual argument.
Mm.
But this idea doesn't stay confined to the first century. Modern ministries have taken this concept of a person being bound and built a staggering level of infrastructure around it.
They have essentially systematized the supernatural. If you look at the source document titled Healing Scriptures, you see the foundational rules of this modern framework.
It lays out these really categorical principles, doesn't it?
It does. Number 1, God wants you well. Number 3, sin is the source, not God. And number 4, do not permit sickness.
Wait, stop there. Do not permit sickness. That changes the entire equation of human health.
It really does.
It shifts the burden of illness completely onto the individual spiritual perimeter. It implies that if you have a cold or cancer or a bad back, it's not just a biological failure. It is a failure to police your spiritual borders against an enemy.
It creates a worldview with 0 biological accidents. Every physical ailment has a spiritual root cause. And in any systematized theology, if there is a spiritual root cause, there must be a defined mechanical sequence for how that root took hold in the first place.
Which is exactly where the training manuals from G. Moody Ministries come in. Our sources note they offer a comprehensive Big Red Book deliverance manual for like $15.
Just $15 for the whole system.
Yeah, and I am looking at this manual, and it claims to explain exactly how a person becomes bound. And it completely upends the idea that demonic influence is just the result of you personally making bad choices, like lying or stealing.
Right. The manual outlines this sequence of demonization, and it heavily emphasizes entry points over which a person has absolutely no control.
Not at all.
The very first entry point listed is sins of the ancestors, and the text specifies a 10-generation bloodline.
Wait, let's do the math on that for a second.
It's a lot of people.
2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents. You go back 10 generations, you are talking about over 1,000 direct ancestors.
Exactly.
You are basically carrying the spiritual DNA of a small city. How does this manual mechanically justify that? Is it viewed like a genetic inheritance, or is there some kind of spiritual legal loophole they cite?
It operates entirely on a spiritual legal framework. In this theology, a sin isn't just a bad action that happens and fades away. It's a breach of contract that leaves a legal door open for demonic entities.
So it's an active liability.
Yes. And unless someone in that bloodline explicitly and officially revokes that legal right in the name of Jesus, the spiritual realm still sees it as a valid entry point, even a century later. You inherit the open doors of your ancestors.
So you are basically born into a house with 1,000 unlocked windows.
That is exactly the metaphor. And the sequence of vulnerabilities continues right into the womb. The manual lists conception in sin as an entry point.
Meaning what?
Meaning, if the conception involved fornication or adultery, then it lists rejection in the womb.
How does a fetus experience spiritual rejection?
The text claims that if a child was unwanted by the parents, or if there was an active threat or consideration of an abortion, a spirit of rejection can enter the unborn child.
That is a remarkably heavy theological burden. I mean, it implies the temporary emotional panic of a parent during pregnancy can literally open a spiritual door for the unborn child.
And the vulnerabilities just stack up. The manual also includes birth itself as an entry point.
Birth trauma.
Yeah, trauma during delivery, the mother's use of anesthesia, the cutting of flesh during a C-section or early surgeries. Then it lists sins committed against an innocent child before they reach what the church calls the age of accountability.
And then finally, your own sins.
Exactly. Only after all of that does it finally list sins committed by the accountable adult.
The implication for the believer reading this manual is staggering. You are walking through life as this highly porous vessel. From the moment of conception, your spiritual integrity is compromised by people you have never met, by the emotional state of your parents, by the doctors in your delivery room, and by your own trauma.
It's a very vulnerable worldview.
Right. So if a person is essentially a porous sponge, absorbing generational and emotional demons, how on earth do they wring that sponge out? Is there a medical procedure for this in these texts?
Well, because the infiltration is systematic, the extraction is equally systematic. The sources provide a rigid sequence of deliverance.
Okay, walk us through it.
Step 1, identify the problems. Step 2, get right with God. Step 3, break demonic ties. This involves formally severing those generational curses, or breaking what they call soul ties with past relationships.
Got it.
Step 4 is cast out demons. Step 5 is pray for healing. And the final step is discipline life.
That last step, discipline life, seems to be the maintenance phase. It echoes the mission of another source we have from Dr. Kenneth Jones's Practical Living Ministry.
Right, which focuses on teaching practical, everyday biblical concepts to change how you think and act.
It's basically the physical therapy after the surgery. But I want to zero in on step 4, casting out demons. The Gene Moody source details the rules for mass deliverance, and the actual mechanics described in this text are jarring.
They are deeply physical, which surprises a lot of people who expect a purely quiet spiritual process.
Yeah, the manual explicitly says you must not hold back or be embarrassed while going through deliverance. It instructs the person to exercise their mind and will, and it specifically says, do not pray in tongues or chant. It states very clearly, deliverance is not prayer.
That is a crucial theological distinction. You're not bowing your head and asking God to please remove the demon.
You're not.
No. The text operates on the belief that spiritual authority has already been delegated to the believer. Therefore, you are issuing a direct legal eviction notice to the entity in Jesus' name.
A legal eviction notice that apparently involves bodily fluids.
Right.
Because the text claims that demons are, quote, like air, and are usually expelled by the exhaling of breath. But then it adds a caveat. It says, if the demons have built a nest in the body, that nest has actual substance, and it is usually expelled by blowing the nose or coughing up phlegm.
It gets very visceral.
If demons are spiritual immaterial beings, how do these manuals justify them taking on physical mass in the respiratory system? Does the text explain that leap from spirit to snot?
Well, it doesn't view the spiritual and the physical as walled-off categories. In this worldview, spiritual entities require a physical medium to dwell in and manifest through.
Okay, so they need a physical anchor.
Exactly. If a spirit of grief or rebellion has occupied a person for years, the belief is that it creates a physical resonance, a nest. When the legal right of that entity is broken, the biological host expels the physical residue of that occupation.
Wow.
It takes the abstract concept of spiritual cleansing and makes it a visceral biological extraction.
It's literally treating the spiritual realm with the same mechanical rules as a plumbing issue. The blockage is cleared and the debris comes out. Now, a massive part of clearing this debris involves breaking curses. The text mentions curses constantly, but what exactly qualifies as a curse in this specific theological framework?
The source defines a curse quite formally. It is uttering a wish of evil against one, or to imprecate evil. It is calling for mischief or injury to fall upon someone.
That sounds very Old Testament.
It is. The text roots this deeply in biblical law, heavily citing Deuteronomy 28:15, which warns that failing to observe God's commandments will result in curses overtaking you. The manual even makes a point to note that there are far more curses quoted in the Bible than there are blessings.
And the manual categorizes an exhaustive list of them. Mental curses, physical, spiritual, financial. They list curses linked to possessed objects, citing Ouija boards, palmistry, and automatic handwriting.
They cover pretty much everything.
Yeah, tribal and voodoo practices too. But the category that stands out as truly unique is what they call charismatic witchcraft.
This is a profound insight into how this movement polices its own internal communities. Charismatic witchcraft isn't about pagans in a forest.
No.
The text defines it as witchcraft practiced by Christians against other Christians.
Witchcraft by Christians. That feels like a total oxymoron based on the strict boundaries these manuals draw. How can a Christian practice witchcraft?
Well, the text defines it as including Jezebelic practices, using personal prophecy to manipulate or control people, and dictatorial pastors who exert toxic control over their congregations.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they are taking the most severe language of the occult and applying it directly to toxic church dynamics.
Think about the sociological impact of that label. If you have a pastor who is a narcissist or highly manipulative, the congregation doesn't just view him as a bad boss who needs HR mediation. By labeling his actions charismatic witchcraft, they elevate interpersonal church conflict to the level of literal cosmic spiritual warfare.
Absolutely.
It gives the congregation the theological vocabulary to identify abuse and spiritually, legally evict the abuser.
It completely reframes the power dynamics of a toxic community. Now, to the listener, hearing about coughing up phlegm and 10-generation curses might sound like a highly isolated, fringe subculture.
It really does.
But our final source completely shatters that assumption.
The bibliography. It is a massive document of healing and deliverance literature. And looking at it is like stumbling into the library of a massive medical school. But every single textbook is dedicated to diagnosing and curing the human spirit.
And it spans major mainstream Christian denominations.
Who are the heavy hitters listed in this library?
One of the most prominent authors listed is Father Gabriel Amorth. He was the renowned chief exorcist of Rome for the Catholic Church.
The chief exorcist of Rome. That is as mainstream institutional as it gets.
Exactly. His book, An Exorcist Tells His Story, argues vehemently that the modern secular world finds things like witchcraft and demonic possession laughable. But he stresses the rigorous use of traditional tools, water, oil, and salt to exorcise homes.
So he's pushing back against the skepticism.
Yes, he argues that exorcists must serve as the prophetic voice in the church, sounding the alarm even if the broader culture mocks them.
He's saying you can laugh at the concept all you want, but the darkness is entirely real, and we have the empirical tools to fight it. Who else is bridging this gap in the bibliography?
You see a massive contribution from pioneers of the charismatic renewal, people like Francis McNutt and Father Michael Scanlon.
Well, what their focus?
They represent a blending of Protestant and Catholic charismatic traditions. Scanlon's work focuses on inner healing, freeing the inner spirit from deep-seated sickness and despair.
And McNutt.
McNutt explores physical phenomena like resting in the spirit, where people fall backwards during prayer, and he provides a very practical manual for deliverance, much like the Moody manuals. He's aiming to clear up misconceptions and false judgments about the practice.
It is deeply analytical. I mean, they are writing peer-reviewed textbooks for the supernatural.
They really are. And then the bibliography shifts slightly to figures like Agnes Sanford, who wrote The Healing Light.
Why is she pivotal?
Because her entry into this worldview came through severe psychological suffering. She was cured of acute depression by a minister who believed in the healing power of prayer.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, her subsequent work deals heavily with healing emotions, the mechanics of forgiveness, and tapping into God's creative energy.
So Sanford starts building a bridge between the clinical psychological diagnosis, acute depression, and the spiritual remedy.
She provides the vocabulary for it, and that bridge is fully realized in the work of Dr. Don Kolber, who is also listed in this bibliography.
Wait, an actual medical doctor?
Yes, he is an actual medical doctor, but his book focuses on the mind-body-spirit connection. He argues that deadly toxic emotions literally destroy the physical body at a cellular level.
Look at the trajectory we just mapped out. We started in the 1st century with a woman in the Gospel of Luke whose spiritual bondage physically tied her muscles into knots. And we trace that all the way to a modern medical doctor arguing that toxic emotional baggage dictates cellular health.
It's incredible.
The vocabulary changes from demons to toxic emotions, but the underlying mechanical philosophy is exactly the same.
It is an unbroken continuum of thought regarding human suffering.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for you, the listener. So what? Why spend your time unpacking $15 deliverance manuals and Catholic exorcism texts?
It's a fair question.
Because regardless of whether you approach these sources as absolute divine truth, as historical curiosities, or purely from the perspective of psychological fascination, they highlight a profound human reality. We all deeply desire to be untied from the unseen things that cause us suffering. These texts reveal a highly structured worldview, where the physical body, the mental state, and the spiritual realm are not separate, isolated silos. They are one single, deeply interconnected ecosystem.
And that interconnectedness is why these frameworks endure. When traditional systems fail to provide relief, people naturally seek out frameworks that address the root, unseen causes.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to consider as we wrap up today's deep dive.
Right. In our modern, highly clinical world, we tend to isolate human ailments into purely biological or chemical terms. We look for the broken bone or the chemical imbalance. But considering the depth and persistence of these ancient and ongoing traditions, what might modern medicine and psychology be missing by ignoring the idea that our emotional, generational, or spiritual baggage could quite literally be the weight that is keeping us bent over?
It really makes you wonder if our modern diagnostic tools are only showing us a fraction of the actual human ecosystem. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.